is the third circle.
More than just watching football, it's a way of life.
You're born and put inside a box. You live in a box. You go to school and tick boxes. You go to work, driving in a box. To work inside a box, staring at a box. And when you die, you're put in a box. The only life worth living is outside of the box.
Lebanese author Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote that to think outside of the box, you first need to realize that you're in a box. But what are these boxes that constrain our perceptions? What is the nature of the artificial constructions that condition the most fundamental assumptions we hold about our place in the universe? These are questions that have intrigued humans through the ages, from the mythologies of the first known civilizations to Jim Carrey starring in The Truman Show. No one can perceive reality in its totality. Anyone who claims they can is, well, a totalitarian. To help us navigate through different domains of our experience, we use certain sets of laws and principles. Why does the apple fall from the tree? Well, to answer this, we simply refer to the toolkit made famous by Isaac Newton. Across millennia, historical advancements have established a myriad of these conceptual toolkits. When we are faced with problems, it's simply a matter of referring to the appropriate one. But what happens when alternative ideas challenge the logics upon which these established toolkits are built? Newton's laws weren't always an authority in science. In fact, science is always changing. It was quite the shock when Copernicus proposed that the Earth does in fact orbit the Sun. A science book from 100 years ago contains different information to the ones used in education today. So how do these changes in our understanding of reality come about? The answer is often slowly, painfully, and with much resistance and hostility. Just ask Galileo. But why? Isn't progress good? The problem, as Taleb identifies, is that many of us prefer not to address the nature of the boxes that constrain our perceptions of reality. And this is understandable. For many, these boxes, toolkits, or what Thomas Kuhn referred to as paradigms, are revered with almost holy reverence. To confront the possibility that your preferred paradigm may no longer be sufficient is a traumatic proposition. Entire livelihoods and reputations are enabled by expertise within paradigms. So if that paradigm is no longer relevant, perhaps neither are you. This forces many to shoehorn the ever-changing reality into their existing frames of reference. The territory is molded to fit the confines of the map. Paradigms will always change, even the most firmly established. But we must also be careful when a dominant paradigm is challenged. You might have noticed that we live in an age of conspiracists and charlatans. Perhaps we always have. Why should we take some new version of reality seriously? Does it really help us understand things in new and improved ways? Or is it just some half-baked theory designed to sell a few books? Increasingly, we are hearing whispers that the domain of football tactics could be on the verge of its own paradigm shift. But what is at stake here? What fundamental assumptions about the game are being challenged and what alternative logics are being proposed? In today's episode of The Third Circle, we're going to be dissecting the prevailing assumptions that give meaning to football. And who better to perform such a delicate procedure with than the man whose breadth of knowledge always makes an ass out of you and me? It's Martin Raffelt. Martin, we're in the third circle. How does it feel?
Very, very good. If you keep introducing me like that, it will always feel very good.
No, it's going to change just when you least expect it, Martin. So it's going to fall.
All right. It's 20% embarrassment, but 80% like I can easily I'm not humble enough to not like it.
Yeah, it's the male ego. I appeal to the male ego here. Yeah. So I just enjoy it while it lasts, Martin. It's okay. We're in the third circle. Here we go again, and we're talking about what are we talking about? We're talking about paradigms. We're talking about the underlying assumptions.
We are, by the way, something we need to talk about in the future. Someone has to remind us maybe is anti-fragility, because you mentioned Taleb, and I just started to read the book, and I think this is such an interesting concept, and we need to discuss in another episode.
Yeah, Taleb has some interesting ones, some interesting concepts. Right. Interestingly, on that, there was a photograph of Fernando Diniz. Did you ever see that? And he's reading Anti-Fragility by Taleb.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, that's for perhaps, and maybe we'll get onto it today. I don't know, probably not, but that's definitely an option for another episode. Okay, but we are talking, today more about paradigms or underlying assumptions. And how do these assumptions help us to make sense of the way we're understanding football, when we're analyzing, when we're coaching, when we're theorizing? And I just want to contextualize this a little bit, Martin, at the outset here, with a quote from Antonio Gagliardi. Antonio Gagliardi is currently working on the staff at Parma in Serie A as an assistant coach. He has previously been working with the Italian national team and under Mancini when they won the European Championships in England, and various other roles. But I just want to give a quote. This is a dialogue between Gagliardi and Dario Pergolizzi, which is in Ultimo Uomo. This is the Italian football publication. Ultimo Uomo translating as the last man, I believe. So this is Gagliardi talking about, how his attitudes to football, how he's perceiving football. This is Gagliardi. I was almost a fundamentalist, convinced that you couldn't win in any other way. I also made mistakes, probably sometimes trying in my role to force choices, to respect the structures. For me, the structure was fundamental. With Mancini and Pirlo, we didn't play for memorized plays, but in reality, over time, looking at them with a different eye, I realized that in the end, the situation wasn't too different. These were codified plays linked to the opponent's response, therefore somehow memorized, almost mathematical. I was truly convinced that this gave us advantages to win matches, and probably it was like that. Then he goes on to say, the path that then led me away from positional football started on the pitch, from direct experience. As time went by, I saw that we were having more and more difficulties, both with Juventus and the national team after the European Championship victory, and with Karagümrük in Turkey. I'm talking about tactical difficulties. Over time, I realized that the advantages we had in the previous months, in the previous years, were less and less, because the teams were changing the way they defended. Okay, so a fairly lengthy quote there from Gagliardi, but touching on this idea that he sort of had one sort of framework, an existing mode of perceiving and watching and analyzing football, but he started to realize through practical experience that this framework, this set of references, this paradigm, we might posit, wasn't actually sufficient to help him make sense and come up with answers to the football that he saw increasingly emerging in front of him. Martin, how does this sit with you? And how does this frame this conversation about the assumptions that are shaping our perceptions of football?
Yeah, this resonates a lot with our equilibrium episode, right? When we were talking about a couple of coaches had a big advantage because they were working positionally, and he also describes he was working positionally, and then probably other teams caught up. Everybody started to work positionally, and it's like now the difference is not like one works positionally and the other not, but like both work positionally, and one does it maybe a little bit better, but the edge is becoming smaller and smaller. So whoever missed this was episode 2 or 3? 2,
I think Equilibrium was episode 2. Yeah, so you can go back and check that out on the third circle. Yeah, episode 2, Equilibrium.
Yeah. So this is also a little bit like I think we're on the process of I think we probably starting in the late 80s, early 90s. We are on a path to discover all the elements of football, and we were discovering zonal marking and then positional play, and we were talking about that in the past. And I think we are now moving into we're moving closer and closer to like discovering everything. And now we and it's very easy to think when you discover one new field, one new approach, which is also very successful and it's working very well because of circumstances, and maybe the approach is also very good. That you then think like that's the way to play football. That's just like it's just so good, it's so successful. It's their approach, it's their way to play football, and. You could be smart enough to think ahead and think like, okay, but what are we concretely doing and what are we missing? And then you will probably find by yourself that this is just one approach that you have. It's not the ultimate approach. It's just one approach, which is good for certain reasons, but in practice, very often we don't do that, right? We are very happy with what we have. We are very comfortable in saying like, okay, we are ahead of the curve here, or like people don't realize it's about being ahead of the curve. They think it's just like some objective end point. So like we are at the end point, we figured out how to do it, the others have not figured it out yet, and then the others come closer and your edge is shrinking, and then you think maybe there's something else to that, and while you're searching for a new competitive advantage, you need to question this base conviction that you are convinced that you figured it out, basically, and you come to the conclusion that you figured something out, but not like everything, and there are other things to it that you also need to figure out.
I mean, the Greek idea is that at a certain point in the process of inquiry, you come to rest because you've reached the goal. And the pragmatists are saying, we haven't the slightest idea what it would be like to reach the goal. The idea that the aim of inquiry is, conformity to correspondence to reality, or seeing the face of God, or substituting facts for interpretations, is one that we just can't make any use of. All we really know about is how to exchange justifications of our beliefs and desires with other human beings, and as far as we can see, that will be what human life will be like forever.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to be getting into. What are these things, right? What are these things that have been figured out already, and what are potentially things that are emerging now that would be useful to figure out, right? Like what is the nature of this stuff? Here's a comment that caught my eye, and I think it's relevant to this. This is from Twitter account, YouTube content creator The Purist. I like a lot what The Purist does. I think they have a very nice way of presenting tactical theory with examples and a nice aesthetic with some kind of longer video essays. Anyway, The Purist, who focuses quite a lot on Barcelona, tweeted this out a couple of days ago. I can't analyze Barcelona anymore. They just play football. So this is super interesting for me, right? So you got an account content creator whose role is analyzing football, and of course then you need to have some degree of ability or competence, right, to analyze football and give your opinions to other people in a interesting, informative, entertaining way. But there you have this kind of admission, this kind of stark admission that's like, well, I'm an analyst, right? I'm a self-proclaimed analyst, but I actually can't analyze the team that I like the most now. And, we can read a little bit of, there's a tongue-in-cheek in the comment or whatever. It's a tweet. We don't have to take it so literally and seriously. But I think there's a serious point in it. And yeah, that struck me as very pertinent to this kind of conversation. And it kind of echoes Gagliardi as well, where you have experienced analysts saying, the football I'm watching now, in this case it was Hansi Flick's Barcelona, it was actually referring to the game against Osasuna, the recent game against Osasuna. And so that then begs the question, what's happened here? Where's the system failure? Where's the breakdown? If someone's been very competent and finds it relatively easy and is comfortable in analysing football, then what has happened to football, or what's happening to football, that has made someone or various people say, hang on a minute, I can't analyze this. Like, it's not making sense. It's stopped making sense. So how does that strike you? I mean, we can stick with this specific example, or we could make it a little bit broader. But this idea that existing frames of analysis are perhaps breaking down somewhat.
I can add a quick story from my Hajduk time. So I was working with Hajduk Split. We were back then quite we were third place in the second league with the B team of Hajduk Split, and so we were doing well. And then we faced I think they were league they were top of the league at this point, and they were playing some very strange football. With 4-3-3, and the three midfielders of them were very good, and they were a possession team which apparently had simply no structure in possession, especially in the center. It was relatively clear, the fullbacks are sort of high, and the wingers are sometimes moving inside, but sometimes going deep. But then the three central midfielders, they were literally everywhere. They were think of any positional possibility that exists, and you could imagine that they would move there. Sometimes the both eights were wide, sometimes two of them were dropping, sometimes two of them were high, one was dropping, nobody was in the middle. Sometimes all three of them are in the middle. Sometimes the six goes wide, the eight drops on the six. Everything, they were just moving everywhere. And we were usually we had it was relatively difficult in Croatia to prepare pressing, because players are naturally inclined to keep the ball. Croatian players you have many Croatian players who are good in keeping the ball.
Yeah, I think I remember the Yugoslavian team of the 1990 World Cup was known as the Brazilians of Europe, right? That was the tag given to those guys. Yeah, very good with the ball, technical ability. Yeah.
So keeping the ball very, very deeply in the nature of Croatian football. I mean, you have you have Brozovic, Modric, Kovacic in the national team, which is a complete world-class central midfield for such a small country, and this is no accident that this exists. So it was usually difficult, but we were usually able to predict relatively well what are the positions going to be that the opponent will take. Even though they already you have a lot of teams who do this Real Madrid stuff, who the players looking Luka Modric, and the central midfielders looking Luka Modric, and they think I can drop wide, I can get the ball there, I can come down there. Modric is also moving around, so you have a lot of players like that. But usually it was still in a certain frame that we were able to sort of predict where they were going, and we were able to give the players a plan and say when they are like that, we press like that. When they go here, you take this guy, you move up, and then we were prepared for everything, and we were comfortable to press them. But for this team, we were okay, if we want to prepare for them correctly, we need 10-15 rules for 15 different situations. We need a rule what we do, and you cannot prepare 15 different pressing scenarios for one game. It's just it's not possible.
I can imagine some coaches who would probably quite like to do that, though.
yeah, probably. But they will also realize I'm lacking time here. You don't have a whole month to prepare a single game. So that was very difficult, and we really had to rethink our whole approach in how we prepare our defensive play. And it was even so that we had then, after a lot of thinking, we had an idea what we do, and we went into game preparation. And in the preparation session, we realized it's not working out. That's not the players don't feel it, and it's not. Even we in our second team can sort of play against it, so it doesn't feel strong. It's too complicated. It doesn't work out. And then we went into the game with a completely difficult plan, a completely different plan, which was much more simple actually. So we had to completely tone it down, simplify it, and we actually won the game. But this whole process was really, really eye-opening to a certain degree, because it shows you that you might have a certain working process, and it might be like working out well, but this is what you said before. It's within a certain paradigm. It's within certain boundaries and rules. And if somebody's not following your rules of the game, then you have to rethink what the game actually is in some way.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote by Jean Baudrillard, the French postmodern, you might say post-structuralist philosopher. And he has this book, I quite enjoy this book. It's called America, and basically it's like, he wrote it in the 80s, I think, and Baudrillard's just like going in 2-footed on Americans, right? He's just like this European intellectual, just like, Americans have no history, you're just a simulation of reality. It's quite funny, and it's a fun read. But one of the quotes that Baudrillard comes in here, and I'm sorry to any Americans listening, this is not me saying this, is Baudrillard. Here we go. Americans believe in facts, but not in facticity. What does he mean? And I think it's exactly what you're saying, right? It's like, yeah, okay, like facts are facts, but they're facts within a certain set frame of references, right? A certain paradigm, a certain what you call arrangement of assumptions, and a certain set of logics that are all working. And it's very easy to just take things as they are, go, well, that's how football works, that's how pressing works. This is just facts, right? As you said, it's like it's easy to become so enamored with the way that you're analyzing and thinking about the game that really the idea of an alternative doesn't even come up. It's like, no, like we've cracked it. We know how this works. This is the logic we need to apply. This is football fact, let's say. But that, as Baudrillard would allude to there, is completely blind of the fact that those facts are inside a larger complex of logics. And so I suppose what we're interested in, you mentioned a couple of things there, sort of specifically about structure coming up there when you're facing the opponent in Croatia, and the fact that the opposition would be more difficult to, let's say, identify the structure that they were using, and that of course makes your preparation for the pressing more difficult. And then we think about the purist comment there, Gagliardi's comment, the purist talking about Barcelona under Flick, and if we just think of Flick's approach to football, Hansi Flick, the German coach, his approach to football in contrast with, let's say, Xavi, right, his predecessor, I think already we can see that structural aspect is also present there. And if we are talking about some kind of paradigm shift, if we are talking about that at all, or if we're talking about what are the nature of the assumptions that we're bringing with us when we're engaging with football, is this topic, this concept of structure, is that something that you see as at the center of all this?
Good question. Well, yeah, like currently, right? I think the equilibrium that we were talking about in episode 2, that was exactly that. Basically, coaches were able to create a structural advantage, and mostly even in a static way. So you put like the opponent is in a certain way statically in their structure, and then you put your own static structure on top of it, and your structure then has certain advantages that the opponent cannot solve in their structure. And then when these structural problems get solved, then usually it's just two structures without an advantage anymore, and then the question is like how to get your advantage. Then you usually you can go to another, like the opponent adapts their structure, then you can move to another one. We actually had a couple of games like that in the top leagues. Like I remember a game between like Nagelsmann and Christian Streich, where they were literally, I think in the first half they were switching formations like every 10 minutes, something like that. So you had like both teams were playing 3 different structures within one half of football. It was crazy. So this is one approach, but then at some point you realize, okay, we are chasing shadows. We are not sticking with our advantage. So we all the time try to create something that's not gonna stay, and then you think like, what can we do which is a little bit more sustainable? And then you think of dynamical things, right? So how can we create this positional advantages in a more dynamical way and not through a static structure? So what movements are possible and such? This is also something that's actually an interesting, maybe also for another episode. Like, you were proposing this idea of relationism, that you basically solve the structural like the fact that structures is more and more redundant or not so helpful anymore by just saying, okay, fuck structure a little bit and just like just focus on what we actually play.
That's my mantra. Absolutely, fuck structure. Couldn't put it any better. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. But then this Thiago Motta approach, for example, is more like, okay, let's create dynamics inside of the structure. Let's put rotations, where like many people were also saying like this is relational because it seems not positional. It's not static, so it's not positional, so it must be relational. But actually, it's not really relational, right? It's positional, but it's just a dynamic way of playing positional.
Yes.
Rather, so it's something else, and probably it would be interesting to discuss a little bit and reflect a bit, like what are other possible directions we could go instead of positions. I made this based on your tweet on the purist thing. I shared this couple of things from the Future of Football seminar, and this was exactly why I called this seminar series Future of Football and not relationism. Like the starting point was a little bit what's positional play, what's relationism, but I didn't want to only break it down to these two paradigms. But I wanted to create an idea in this seminar series about like what else is there, like what could be other paradigms and what could be directions we could move on. What are the things we are not discussing, we are not seeing. And I shared this one picture with the dynamics, options, positions, and control, which I identified as like the 4 aspects you can use to win a game, basically. And this gives a little bit of a hint, like how many things are there which are not sufficiently discussed yet.
Yeah, I liked as well the way you proposed. I think it was 4 areas or 4 styles. You can correct me on the terminology. And it was something like, playing from positions was positional play. We were starting with combinations is more relational play. And then you also had dynamic play, and I think like kick and rush play, something like that. There were these 4.
So I called it positional, which is passing. Yeah. Relational, which is combination. Dynamic. Yeah. Dynamic play, I think, which is from movement, from runs, and then recovery play, which is like from ball recoveries, which is practically kick and rush.
Yeah, kick and rush.
Or very counter-pressing base, Red Bull style approach.
Yeah, and I think that what's nice about that, and you've alluded to that there, is that it's proposing a multiplicity, right, of paradigms here, and I think, and I agree with you, like. It's not as if football is entirely positional and now it becomes entirely relational. We move to the next phase. Like that's not really what's happening here. That's not really the dynamic. But I think and we've alluded to this previously as well, what seems to have happened was that the positional paradigm became so dominant that it appeared to many analysts that this was the way that you analyze football. Yeah. And so when you get that kind of extreme dominance of one paradigm, you can also kind of refer to that as a singularity, where the model is mistaken for reality itself, right? And again, this alludes back to Taleb's point about to think outside of the box, you must first realize you're in a box. And of course, if it's a singularity that you're existing in, you don't see the box, right? Because you're like, no, I'm not in a box because I understand I'm using this frame of this logic, this paradigm, which is accurate. And you're like, well, no, it's not 100% accurate. It has many, many, many blind spots. This doesn't mean that it's not hugely useful and hugely beneficial in many, many situations. But the very nature of this set of assumptions, this paradigm, is that it is always incomplete. So given that, let's investigate the areas that it is blind to and try and bring to life some of the assumptions and logics that might work in those previously uninvestigated areas, and then, as I think your work is, your work suggests, we can start to propose multiple paradigms of football understanding. And I really like this idea of movement from a unipolarity to a multipolarity. And I think that's actually an interesting one, like even like a very like meta sort of global societal cultural idea seems to have been over the last, second half of the last century, since the Second World War, there has been this kind of force to globalize and make everything, set and perhaps an underlying homogenization in process. And it seems as though now a lot of that's breaking down, and there's increased fragmentation. There's the board is not so simple. It's just having like USA one side, Soviet Union on the other side. They're the superpowers. Now it's like, oh, you have other superpowers now, and it's like there's multiple locuses of power that are engaging in unfortunately in conflict many times, but in dialogue as well. And this seems to be for better or worse a reasonable metaphor, right? And it's like, okay, yes, thinking together and having unipolarity in some sense is always useful, but you seem to be moving into this more multipolar, and you might call it like trans-paradigmatic, like many different paradigms operating, and you, as when you're engaging with a topic, whether it's politics, culture, whatever, sociology, football, there are many different paradigms and many different logics that are all in play, and it's something like the skill is knowing where and when to apply which logic, right? So, okay, I'm analyzing this team, I'm going to apply the positional logic. But I'm analyzing this team now, so I need to reach for another toolkit. I actually need something else. This is insufficient. And yeah, I think that's a very interesting thing for coaches and analysts to consider, right?
Mm-hmm. I think what's really important about that is also to get rid of bipolarity, because bipolarity always creates, like, it touches our monkey mind at the spot where we are defending our family against other, like our tribe against other tribes, and like our tribe is now positional player and their tribe is relationism, or the other way around, and then we attack each other, and like realizing that there are more tribes than two, and you're not part of one tribe, but it's just like certain options that you have, makes it a little bit easier to get out of that like very very dogmatic approach, and this very defense, like being very like many people were in this whole discussion about relationism, many people who are very much in favor and very much like positional play, and value positional play, they got very defensive about it, right? Which is like completely unnecessary, because I mean, I guess you can still have the opinion that a very, very positional game would be the best possible game. That might be true, and this is a plausible opinion. But that's not really an argument against somebody else trying something else, I guess.
I might just say I probably take a little bit of responsibility as well, because probably some of my framing is somewhat provocative, especially like early like essays.
It's your fault.
Yeah, yeah, probably. But like, I mean, you write sort of Fernando Denis versus the man machine, and this is like this robot army who are coming to take away your human spirit, and like obviously that's gonna, ruffle a few feathers, but I think it served a purpose anyway to try and bring the debate to life. But I think it's
it's good to tickle the monkey mind a little bit.
Yes.
It's usually better than like being very, very accurate and correct in what you say, and nobody has any emotions about it, because everybody's just looking at it and it's like, yeah, seems about right. Let's move on.
Yeah, exactly. Better to be interesting than right.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. What I wanted, like, I had a really good thought, I think, last week. Very, very humble introduction at this point.
That's become your trademark, Martin. Yeah, that's what you're known for.
I had a really I was brilliant.
Yeah. Even by my standards, I was particularly brilliant in this moment. Okay. Yeah.
No, it's actually a very simple thought, but I think like for me, for myself, it created a lot of clarity for myself. So that's why it felt like a good thought, which is that I think you were referring to like identifying the box when you're thinking inside of the box. What's the box? And like we identified the box as a little bit like the positional thing. I think we can call it a little bit more general, the preparation phase of the game. So what we do in coaching a lot in the last 10-15 years, and what we didn't do much in the past. So what's really the difference with all the positional things that came up, and this is not only positional play and build up, but also what I was talking about, like the positional preparation of pressing, for example, was that we talk a lot and we prepare a lot how players prepare for situations. What do they prepare for? This is the next thing. Reactive intuitive game. So you have always, if you look at the game, you have situations that are just like quick improvisation. So there are duels, there are dribblings, there are turns, there are quick combinations. So there's just quick things happening and players improvising. And then there are things before that. Usually when the ball is outside of the block, so usually when the ball is inside of the block, it becomes more messy. When the ball is outside of the block, it's a little bit more clean and predictable, and it's not there's outside of the block there's nothing happening which is decisive. There's nothing created which leads directly to a goal, right? Like sometimes you can play a ball directly from behind the block, from in front of the block, behind the block. That's one situation, but usually this is like when the ball is outside of the block and there's no pressure on the ball, the teams are preparing for the moment where they play forward, where they play in the block, where there are duels, where there are combinations, where there are dribblings. And we developed a super strong focus on this, on the preparation phase of situations. So we know exactly how to circulate, how to prepare our pass forward, how to get to the other side, then to attack on the other side. But like we're talking a lot about moving the ball from the right to the left and then attack on like move the ball from the strong side to the weak side and attack on the weak side, but we don't talk so much about how do we attack on the weak side. So you usually then have a 2 against 2 situation, 3 against 3 situation. If you're very quick, you maybe have a 3 against 2 situation. And I didn't see many, like I never saw much stuff which were proposing any solutions for that. Like nobody has really concepts to say like this is how you very quickly outplay a 2 against 2, a 3 against 3.
Yeah, I think there's probably some like a very limited set of like very common ones, like, you know, an underlapping half space run, you know, something like that, or like a wide you see like a wide triangle rotations and like these kinds of things. But yeah, they're very, I mean, they're quite general and they're quite, you know, they're you know, formulaic, let's say, in the and they're not really into the details of the.
And this again, basically still the preparation. If you say like you do an underlap, then you're still like you're coming from outside of the block and you're running inside. But then like when while you are doing the underlap, like what's your target when you do the underlap? Where do you go? When do you ask for the ball? When do you stop? When do you maybe move back or keep moving towards the box or like whatever? All these kind of things. And like what are the principles? If you do the underlap and you get the ball inside, what do you do then? This is always like black box. The players have to solve it, and I think it's honestly it's a little bit natural that it's like that, because like you could distinguish also that like the preparation phase of attacks is the task of the coach, and the reactive phase is the task of the player. But still, you need to I think you need to work together with your players. So you need to prepare in a way that the players like, and you also have to help the players being better in these reactive things.
Yeah, this concept of preparation and preparing things, I think, is really important here, because, like you say, it's almost like in, you know, the pre-game tactical plans or whatever, the match prep, that the coaching staff, you know, to more or less degrees in concert with the players, but, you know, generally speaking, like the coaching staff and like that's what they're doing, they're kind of mapping out, right? Ball routes and strategies, based on the opponent, based on qualities of the players, etc., based on the principles they play with. But yeah, these things are being mapped out, and you'll see them in match prep situations, right? You'll see examples given on boards with the way the ball moves, and this is how this is the situation that we want to try and bring to life in the game. And I think if there is some kind of, and maybe that is one of these assumptions, right? In the sort of preparation, and you mentioned that they're being done by the coaches. The preparation is, from the mind of the coaches and put onto the players. But then, of course, the question is, well, how are the players going to solve problems if there is no preparation for their, when they encounter the problems? And I think there's something I'm particularly interested in is a mode of coaching, a mode of analysing, a mode of perceiving football, where rather than giving these pre-planned, mapped out, schematic blueprint solutions, the idea of coaching is actually to help develop the perceptual interpretations of the players, so that because the answers for these problems are actually in the information of the environment. They're contained in the environment. If the players are elegant and skilled enough in interpreting those reference points, it's like the moment things are happening, the directions, the speed of trajectories of opponents, of the ball, of teammates, all these very fluid and complex dynamics that are unfolding in the player's perceptual field. If rather than limiting that, which is a very useful way to do it, like limit that kind of chaotic complexity of reality and make it simple and give these kind of planned out things and everyone can execute them when they're on the same page, etc. But it seems to me that there would be a lot of benefit if a mode of coaching can be developed whereby it is the player themselves or the players themselves, because also knowing each other is super important in the team as well, knowing your ability, knowing the ability and preferences of your teammates, and then being able to account for these things in the moment. It sounds like I'm asking a lot here, but I don't think I am, because I think this is what footballers do, this is what good footballers do, without really even thinking about it, is that they are interpreting the information of the environment and coming up with functional real-time solutions. And if there's a way of coaching that in players, that would be something of a fundamental shift, I would say, in our assumptions about how, let's say, attacking play pans out.
Yeah. That's I did 2 years ago this attacking play seminar series, and the last part of the series was basically exactly that. So that was group tactics and individual tactics, and this was you really summed up the key message of this seminar that I put there, where I was showing, for example, a couple of situations where Thiago is playing deep passes, and what you can observe is that he is not he's playing very, very surprising passes in situations. I stopped before he played the pass and asked the participants what's going to happen, what pass is going to happen, and you couldn't, most of them couldn't imagine the pass at all, because usually the reason is that players are usually scanning when they're playing passes. They're scanning for who is free, and what Thiago is doing, he's looking for who is going to become free. So in the moment where Salah is starting a run, he's not free. He's not already free, right? But he's going to become free because he's just starting to sprint. So Thiago is seeing that Salah is starting to run, and then he plays the pass right in the moment where you can see that Salah is not running already. He's not free already, but Thiago is anticipating he's going to become free. So he chips into space, and Salah is the first one arriving at the ball because he starts to run earlier. So this kind of stuff. This is very logical. This is actually you can absolutely imagine that you can teach this to a player, that he starts to look at who is going to start a run instead of looking for who is free. When you just look for who is free, your attacking your options for attacking passes are super limited, because it's so rare that an attacking player is really free, because they're all the time up there 3 against 5. So there must be a huge defensive mistake until somebody's completely free, usually.
Yeah, this this actually links back nicely, I think, to the Flicks Barcelona, because I think one of the main things you watch, or you observe when you watch Flicks Barcelona, is that they don't care about really the free man, getting a free man free so that they can pass the ball to that player. They're passing to players under pressure all the time, and it's usually then a timed movement, a coordinated movement that, as you said, allows a player to become free in the process of that combination, right? You can imagine, just to try and paint a little picture, they play these inside diagonal passes, let's say from Koundé, or the fullback will play a pass inside, let's say, to Lewandowski, who's offering in the centre, and maybe Lewandowski has very strong pressure from behind or whatever, but then maybe Pedri or Olmo makes a curved run around the side of Lewandowski, who then flicks the ball to the side, and all of a sudden Pedri is free, right? If you freezed it like when the pass was being made, it wasn't there. There was no free man there. And I think that is one of the things that causes a little bit of system failure, perhaps, for some analysts who are so used to analysing possession football in terms of how are they creating free men, and that almost is how you play possession football. It's like, well, you need to be creating free men, like somewhere, or otherwise how are you going to keep the ball, right? That's kind of the logic that was being applied there. But you can actually just dispense with that logic and say, well, no, like we create free men in a different way, in a different in a different mode almost. Yes, we want players to be able to get on the ball, looking forward, free from their markers, etc. But that comes as a result of player interpretation of certain dynamics of the moment. And yeah, it would then look. And also, I think Argentina recently against Brazil, although it has to be said, Brazil were shit. They were really bad in that game. So, like, just to give a bit of context to that. But still, it's Brazil. And, Argentina played a very interesting style again, and it's a style they've been playing for a number of years now under Scaloni, where they really are tapping into something, and this is explicit from the Argentinian coaches, and I think it's an interesting thing to touch on here, that they are really trying to reconnect with some idea or concept of what Argentinian football is, something, this commonality. They refer to it as la nuestra, and just meaning our way. That's all it translates as, just our way. And this then starts, you get to start to thinking about, and I think we're going to go into this in another episode on communication specifically, but if you can form almost a language of play whereby the players are super, super good in interpreting each other and each other's strengths and weaknesses and tendencies and habits, then that can really be the tactical plan. That can be the tactics. It's like, okay, like this guy DePaul likes the ball like that, or DePaul has a tendency to do that, so I'm going to do that in this moment. It's gone into Almada, so Almada's probably going to see me if I do this, then I'm going to do like that. And it's like, you're not planning this on a board in front of the players necessarily. And so yeah, this idea of the players having this. And it's interesting as well to think about in terms of, we talked about identity last time, national identity, club identity. How does that influence the communication signals that the players are using? And I think this concept of communication is really fundamental to all of this. How the players are interacting and interpreting with each other in order to solve these tactical problems that are arising in the game. And if there is some kind of paradigm shift, for me, like, this is the shape of it. And I'm very excited by it, like as a potential. I don't say it's gonna happen. I don't say I'm right about it, but I think there's a lot to suggest that a mode of engagement with football in this more perspectival idea of inter-player communication systems could be very beneficial, right?
I was a friend sent me this a clip from the Argentinian team, and then another clip from some Brazilian team. I don't know if it was Cruzeiro or something like that. A very relational team anyway. Maybe it was an old Fluminense clip. I'm not sure. And asking, like, because both didn't look exactly positional, and he was asking, like, why does it feel so different? What's the reason why they're very unsimilar? And I'm going to put a Twitter thread probably about it. Maybe right after we record the episode. So when the episode is published, I probably put out the Twitter thread. That's maybe an interesting topic, but maybe not for the discussion here so much. But one thing that I wanted to highlight is really this playing over the free man that you brought up. Which was my main attempt to characterize the positional play that we do, and I think this is not really something that was ever explicitly communicated about positional play, but this was some implicit, completely obvious natural thing that you would do, because obviously this is also like many teams. When you look at some amateur team, when you look at some people just playing in their free time together, then it's totally natural to see like who is free. Okay, I give him the ball. It's a very natural way to play football, and that's why it never really got it didn't get named, and then people really struggle to identify that they are super stuck with this idea. And we saw a lot of teams, and I'm sure that many coaches who went deep into positional play and have actually coached it, actually applied it, know that situation. And you can also see it. That's why teams who play positional sometimes look so static and uninteresting, because they keep searching for free men in areas where you usually cannot create a free man. So like either you wait for a very long time until you finally are able to create something there, and like these positional rotations for Motta, they are trying to create these free men higher up the pitch a little bit quicker than just having this like the statical structure and waiting for the opponent to fuck up something. So you either wait forever or you try to find solutions without finding the free man. And when you are like completely naturally stuck into searching for free players, you won't get to the idea of aborting, like getting rid of that. If you're not aware that this is your box, you cannot think outside of it. In the moment where you realize my box is searching for the free player, you can very easily come up with several ideas. What else can you do? You can send a player who's marked into space. You can play into pressure. You can try to like put a 2-against-2 situation. Just put a ball there and try to solve the 2-against-2 somehow. You can say, okay, if we try to play for the free man as long as we can, and then we start to solve 1-against-1 with dribblings. Several ways to do other things, but you will only start if you get rid of the super focus on having the free player, and this is really the key thing here.
Yeah, I think this aspect of the free man is so pervasive, right? And you've talked about it there, how it's almost just like this unaddressed assumption of all of this. And you'll hear educators or coaches talking about that, and it'll be, the more space and time a player has, the better decision they will make, right? That's almost proposed as like a fact. I mean, and it kind of is a fact in some sense. Like, yeah, like when you have space and time, you can kind of do what you want with the ball, okay? But often in the context of the game, that fact isn't actually that useful, because like the defense is organized and you're outside you're outside the block or whatever. You might be free for a moment.
This is let me jump in there, because this is a perfect example for something that I wanted to bring up. We're talking about certain logics which form a paradigm, and the key mistake, which I'm sure like everybody who has an analytical approach is probably a victim of that mistake, is that you have one logical one logical attempt, one logical line from which you derive a certain conclusion, and then you say, okay, this is logical. This is true because it's logical, because I had a logical I went down a logical route. So because I went down a logical route, I surely came to a logical conclusion and to an objectively true conclusion. And you probably did, but probably you missed half of the picture, because there are other logics as well. And in this case, it is a true logic that like more space, more time helps me as a player. That is true. But more space and more time will make the opponent more passive. Because when the opponent realizes he has so much space, he has so much time, we cannot win the ball from him, they won't attack, they drop back, they stay compact, and they never move out, and we create a passive game. So we make the opponent passive with it, and this is maybe something that we don't want, or we don't want it all the time at least. So this is a very, very, very important takeaway from that, and this is something that you overlook when you only look at this aspect of time and space, and there are so many examples for that. I was saying that, like, I think I brought up the examples before where I was definitely guilty of doing this mistake with man marking, where our logic was always like, in man marking you follow the opponent, so the opponent dictates where you are, so man marking is bad. And this is, yes, the logic is correct. You are following your opponent. Your opponent is deciding where you are, and this is not something that you want. But other logic, you automatically adapt to every structure of the opponent. So you always have everything covered. Like, the opponent just has nowhere to play in theory. So this is also very bad. So there are two logics which come to different conclusions, and then the truth is a mix out of these things. And the other thing would be Real Madrid, which, like, they don't occupy the middle, they don't have a structure. This looks very bad. How do they play positionally? And then you can argue that, like, occupying the middle, why it's so valuable. The opponent is going to protect the middle anyway. You're going to play it wide anyway, so it maybe makes sense to occupy the wings first, and only when the opponent moves out of the middle, then you move inside. And, like, the logic that the middle is more important and more central, this is a correct logic. And then, like, we want to occupy the center. But then there's the other logic, that this logic is also correct for the opponent, and this also has implications.
Yeah, I really love this, and I'm really reminded, and I'm sorry I don't have the author of the book, but it's a book on the French philosopher, not Baudrillard this time, but Gilles Deleuze, and he's someone that I've referenced in some of the essays on relationism. I just want to read this. This is, and again, I'll try and link to the author and the name of the book in the episode notes. I don't have it with me here. I just have this excerpt. Okay, here we go. Logic doesn't mean rational. We could even say that for Deleuze, a movement is all the more logical the more it escapes rationality. The more irrational, the more aberrant, like weird, and yet the more logical. It is like Dostoevsky's and Melville's characters. They can offer no reasons, although they obey a commanding logic. Irrational is not synonymous with illogical for Deleuze. On the contrary, that is why, from beginning to end, the logics that interest Deleuze are those that escape all reason. So this is very interesting, and it's like, okay,
I understood absolutely not. Like, I have no clue what he means with that.
Yeah, so basically, just really, what you're talking about there, Martin, is that there is, again, we mentioned unipolar to multipolar. There is a multiplicity of relevant logics. Right? And logics don't necessarily even have to be rational, or that you can, like, work out on a piece of paper with some kind of calculation. Like, there's a logic to art, for example. So if you're like an art critic or whatever, and you go to see a painting, like, you will use a logic to form your critique, right? Your opinion or your feeling towards that painting. But it's not some kind of, like, it's not like it's not like a cheat sheet to this, It's like you're not putting things into little boxes and, like, they equal up and they add up. Same with, like, a restaurant critic or a food critic or whatever, music critic, art criticism. Yes, it's a logic you're using, but the logic is actually irrational. It's something more to do with feeling and aesthetic.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's always interested me, especially in a domain like combination play in football, where it's happening very quick, and of course, relationism refers to this specifically, is that the logic being used by the players are almost difficult to explain, because they are a deeply felt connection between the players in terms of their shared interpretations, where they're from, how they've grown up, how they understand the game. And yeah, I think that, like you said, falling foul of the problem of using only one commanding logic, and I think they tend to be, like, more rationalized in football, and we think of it as like a scientific exercise, and we can, like, work things out. And there's always been, like, a little bit of a suspicion, and, like, the aesthetic stuff is, like, secondary or whatever, and it's like, oh, very nice. And I don't think it's that simple. And I think that actually examples like Argentina, basing their entire tactical system on a shared cultural understanding and perspective, is actually very interesting and significant. I don't call it a development, but it's being explicitly talked about by Argentinian coaches. Interestingly, Matthias Mann who is assistant coach of Argentina, recently wrote a book on football tactics, but interestingly, this book is a fictional novel. It's called In the Time of the Trees, and so Mana is communicating feelings about the tactics of football. This is a World Cup winning assistant coach, right? Previously, interestingly, if we could do a little bit of Mana history, he was the guy that, like, one of the earliest bloggers on Pep Guardiola, right? Paradigma Guardiola was one of the very early blogs explaining, like, Juego de Posición, etc. He wrote a book based on that called Paradigma Guardiola, the Guardiolan Paradigm. He worked with Sampaoli at Sevilla, now Argentina. And so this strikes me as, again, very interesting. You've got in this quote I read about Deleuze that they're talking about, Dostoevsky, Melville. They're talking about characters in a fictional novel. And I've not read Mana's book. It's in Spanish, and my Spanish isn't good enough to read a book like that. But it strikes me as very interesting that the mode of communication for tactical ideas for Mana in this case is fiction. And it's like, okay, well, we're talking about facts here. We want facts in football, right? We want to be objective. We want all this stuff. Yes, to a degree. That logic is very useful, absolutely. But maybe there are aspects of football where this kind of logic isn't supreme, and that we can tap into a more aesthetic felt understanding of the logics of what's happening. And I think that concept, although it kind of seems a bit woolly and fluffy the way I'm describing it right now, I think it holds a bit of a key as to where certain threads of football tactics might be going. What do you think about that, Martin?
I think a little bit what you are maybe heading to with this thought is that basically we get a little bit more back into like cultivating intuition and not deriving everything from logic. Did we talk about that in the last episode? I think so. This thing with like logic and intuition, and that intuition is like the competent decision, the intuitive decision is based on more things. It includes more things, and logic tends to be reductionist. And actually, I just was remembered, and maybe I do understand the quote that I didn't understand before, because for a long time I was really obsessed with like doing statements which are exactly in a way that they could be ironically meant or serious. Like you read the statement and you are not sure if it's ironic or serious, and it's a little bit of both. Like it sounds like it's a little bit too much, and it seems ironic because it's so extreme, but if you think about it, it also is somewhat plausible. And finding these things was so fun for me. And we also we actually had Spielverlagerung insiders. At some point we had a list of like 10 or 20 football theses, which were like this was just like 20 lines, which were like the most outraging bullshit that is in a certain way perhaps correct.
Yeah.
Like when your first emotional reaction is like that's nonsense, and when you think about it, it's like, well, maybe there's a point in it. This is really interesting to find this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but there's this inherent ambiguity in the statement, right? And and that's a lot of fun, and I think interesting things can grow from that. And of course, that is, like you say, it's not this kind of like fact, right and wrong, objective thing. It's like it's a much more to do with interpretation. How do you interpret that statement? And of course, interpretation is something I see as really, really central to I would say the domain of tactics that I'm interested in moving into is all about interpretation of the player. It's the player is interpreting reality, and they do it in different ways because they are different people. Of course, then comes the question of, well, what's the coach doing then? Like what, like is he just like, if he's if it's all up to the player, like what's the coach saying? But it's
shaping their intuition,
right? Yeah, with their own game insight, right? With their own ideas about football, their own interpretations, and coaches will have their own interpretations of football that are different. And it's almost this connection, right, between the coach and just to give people might not be sure about how this kind of works, but you'd be if you're a tactical analyst or assistant coach responsible for this kind of thing. Maybe the head coach might do it in some situations too, but you're sitting down with players, right, in meetings with video clips, and like going through clips with players, and you're having a conversation, a dialogue. Let's say you freeze the frame, and you're like, okay, like, do you remember this one? Like, what did you see here? Do you remember like what the feeling was in this moment? And the player will like describe what they thought and why they did their action and why it was, why they chose to do that action. And then it's a question of, yeah, okay, well, it's not saying, oh yeah, that's wrong or that's a bad action, or maybe sometimes it is more like that, but like you're trying to point out maybe things that might be useful for the player to take into consideration next time. Maybe they won't. Like maybe they know best, right? Maybe they have better solutions. But as the coach, you're like just trying to broaden their repertoire of what they're interpreting, right? And that for me is a really fun process. It's probably I like a lot of things about coaching, but that to me is one of the most like enjoyable experiences working with players like that. And yeah, this is about because you are using objective references as well, right? Like the goal, you want to get to the goal, and like there's just speed and trajectory and things that can be measurable happening in that moment. So it's kind of this unison or this dialogue between that kind of subjective into subjective interpretation and then the more objective, I won't say totally objective, I'll always just say more objective, dynamics of the game. And yeah, I think that we've been, if there has been a dominant paradigm, I think it's been, let's say, overly fixated with like objective references, let's say, and there is now, I think, a big scope to tap into the possibilities of subjective interpretations, but they have to be functional.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. It's interesting to like, and this is like a meta level where you the one way to question one paradigm to question is probably the paradigm that you are following logic. Instead, like I was in the last episode, I was saying that like is a game model, is it the function of the game model that the players have to like apply the game model to be successful, or is it the game model helps the player to play well? And in a very similar way, does logic work for your mind? Logic can, like, you can have a very mathematical mind is very often in a way that or an objectively driven mind that you think like logic is my thinking is logic. But I think the better way to look at it is my thinking is intuition. I know a lot of things. I have a lot of references. I have feelings. I have intuitions. And then logic is a tool to help your intuition, to shape your intuition, to guide your intuition.
I think I'll just put in there, though, as well, just referring back to that quote and the little bit of conversation we had about Deleuze and the fictional characters, is that logic... there's a logic also to intuition. I just think logic does not mean rational. There are logics to all different kinds of things. But I think that, again, there's been a bit of a singularity in the way that the term or concept logic is thought of as this rational, calculative, thing. But there are actually many logics. And so, that's why the point that I think is very important is that there are, like I said, a logic to understanding art. There's a logic to appreciating food or music or other people. There are lots of different logics. And I think we just became a little fixated with one version of the logic, of what logic is. And without kind of trying to derail this into just like, endless semantics about the term logic, which I fear may be too late.
You said the words logic and objectivity too often now.
Yeah, I know.
Like your limit is reached. You cannot say
this. Is the repetition. This is the technique of repetition I'm trying to use here. Yeah, but I think I fear I've exhausted it. I feel that getting right back to where we began with the comments from Gagliardi, the comments from the purist, and many others that I speak to on a regular basis and are interested in this conversation. There, I think, is beginning to be a realization that, the maps we've been using to navigate around the football that we're engaging with have always had significant blind spots, but those blind spots are now almost kind of pushing up through the map, right? And they're kind of breaking it a little bit. And when you watch Flick's Barcelona or Scaloni's Argentina, and these are very good teams. This is the thing as well. They're very, very good teams. The big players, and they're really enjoyable to watch. So people want to analyze them and want to understand what's going on, there is a breakdown in the paradigm that has been dominant in tactical analysis. And I, for one, Martin, I'm very excited about the possibilities of where it might be going.
You're trying to round up the episode, but I still have stuff.
Hey, listen, you can detect now the tone of my voice, right? When I move into the host mode, right?
That's our communication.
Yeah, exactly. That was good. I thought I'd get away with it, but no, you picked up on it. That's good. Well, listen, we don't operate on some kind of linear time here in the third circle, Martin. So I can do the end like halfway through if I want. You know what I mean? And then we just like, right. There are many different timelines happening. So please, go for it.
And then you do it again, and it comes back full circle.
Yeah.
No, that was actually the thought why we decided to do this this topic today, because I wanted to come back to the last episode and criticize myself about something that I said there.
What this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit with the idea we have of you, Martin. Surely this humble self-critique. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. I'm confident, but I'm also self-critical.
Nice.
That's a very good mixture. I can just like recommend it.
Yeah.
Is the word. The thing that I was saying was I brought like two things. I said that game models have three functions, and I mentioned one function where I said like this can be probably not get rid of. Like this is really, there's one necessary function, which is synchronization. So you have to agree on what you do in some capacity. And my reasoning was that like imagine you build a house and like the people didn't agree what you build, and then you're not going to build a house, but you just fool around, and at the end you don't have a house. And I think the reasoning and the conclusion is wrong here.
Okay.
So the reasoning is so wrong that I took an example as a reasoning that I usually use as an example for how you shouldn't watch football, because a point that I tend to make is that football is like a competitive game, and it's not a project. In a project, you have a fixed outcome that you want to reach, and there's a clear way to reach that outcome. So, for example, I want a house, and I have to make these steps to build a house. But in football, there is a clear outcome in the sense of I want to score more goals than the opponent, but there is no clear path, and there is no clear idea what you need to do in order to achieve that. You need constant figuring out. So football is about figuring out in real time what's the best thing to do. You cannot and we talked about predictability and such. Sometimes you can predict a couple of things, and then you can act on it. But many things cannot be predicted, but they need to be they need to be figured out. And so this metaphor that I used is just not applicable for football. It's a very bad metaphor, and because of that, also the conclusion is a little bit wrong, because the way of synchronization, the way how you need basically football teams are synchronized. They know when we have the ball we want to score. They know when the opponent has the ball we want to prevent scoring. They are synchronized in the most basic way, and then you were already basically, without explicitly criticizing that conclusion from myself, you basically did, because you suggested this decentralized communication that we were talking about, and this is something that you can absolutely observe when you watch football teams, that not the whole team is on the same page, and sometimes they still play very well. If you look at Real Madrid, they very often they're figuring out their idea how to attack on the fly. They don't know when they start to attack how they're going to attack. Do we attack over the wing with some combination, with some dribbling, with some long ball through the center? Do we switch to the other side? They're figuring out on the spot, depending on what they're able to do and what the opponent offers them. and they have certainly some communication in between like certain players, and they know each other and blah blah blah. We will talk about communication in another episode. It's a very complicated thing, and it is naturally between 11 people. It's decentralized, right? And it's just not. I said synchronization is necessary, and I really want to say it's certainly not. It's quite obviously not necessary. It's something that might be very helpful in certain circumstances. It's a good tool to use. I don't say it's bad. I don't even say that it's like, it might be even true that it's always better to be synchronized in a certain way. This is a Klopp theorem, by the way. Klopp said like it's better that everybody does the same thing even when it's not good. Like it's better when I think he actually said it's better when everybody does the same bullshit than if the team doesn't really know what they are doing. And like maybe that's true, but it's not necessarily true. It's a very complicated matter for sure.
It is, and I think it's a really nice way. And I think we're foreshadowing this episode on communication, which I'm super looking forward to. And it's nice because you talk about this synchronization, this standardization. I think about it. I remember, like, you know, in Britain we have the BBC, the British Broadcasting, institution, and back in go back to like the 40s or 50s or whatever. Every announcer on the BBC would talk like this. Like the King of England, and everyone would talk, and this is how one should talk, and this is to standardize language, right? And it's like, this is the correct language. In English we call it the Queen's English, right? You speak the Queen's English, and then of course like more conservative, like establishment-minded people would be very suspicious of slang language, right? The words that emerge from the street. Oh my God, look at the youth today. Look at the words they use. It's disgusting. It's vulgar. They should learn how to speak properly. This kind of thing is very interesting because, slang language, like localized vernacular, localized terminologies, these are coming from the bottom up, right? These emerge from milieus, like complex meetings of different interpretations, cultures, whatever. And you get different entire dialects emerge, right, from these differences, right? So Klopp's talking about he wants people doing the same thing, but when you put lots of people of different interpretations together, oftentimes in the right set of circumstances, then a new functional solution emerges. And I think dialects are very much like that, and it's interesting. And of course that links directly with communication and what we're talking about here. So yeah, I think that's something we're going to get into. But I think that is something that this new paradigm of tactical analysis, hopefully, will be investigating. These because hey, I think it was René Maric who said, and I think maybe he was quoting someone else. I remember he said it a few years ago. Everything is communication, right? This for me, that's what, as a coach, as someone who tries to understand football to some degree, it is all about communication and how we consider those things. And I think that previously this previous paradigm has seen this kind of one-to-many mode of communication. Imagine one node shooting out to many, like a teacher standing in front of a class, or one-to-many, the BBC, the one broadcaster puts it out to all the different people. You get some kind of homogenization. But I think that breaks down now. And in reality, in the world we live in, it's not like that anymore. Oh, where do you get your news source from, right? It's like, oh yeah, I did my own research. All this kind of stuff. You're like, it's completely fragmented. It's decentralized, and there's danger to that. Like, that's a dangerous place to be, and that's why a lot of people are nervous about the world right now. And it's very unpredictable. But also in that unpredictability, in that ambiguity, in that fragmentation, there is the potential for new novelty, functional solutions. It can emerge from this, and I guess maybe someone would call me an optimist to be taking that view. Hopefully not naively, but yeah, that's if I'm going to try and sketch out what these set of assumptions are that we previously had and what we're moving to, I think it would be something like that. Any closing thoughts on that, Martin?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the an important thing to keep in mind is always, because we were talking about like questioning your paradigm, thinking outside of the box, identifying your box. It's very, very simple for you and for me and for every human being to to see this kind of stuff failing, to somebody being not reflective enough, not self-critical enough when it's somebody else, right? If you are outside of the box, if you're in your box, you can very easily see that somebody is stuck in their box. But identifying that you are also stuck in your box and you are missing something, and I am myself making a mistake. This is so much more difficult to identify, and especially when you generally think of yourself as a very reflective person, and we talk about many things, and we are able to identify paradigms. We are able to identify like thinking limits and these logics that we were talking about. We are able to identify it, so we are certainly very reflective. We are certainly very good in also questioning ourselves, right? But this needs really a lot of effort. This is much more difficult to do for yourself than for others, and it's much easier to do. It's much easier to say, I am self-reflective, I am self-critical, and be under the impression that you are, than actually being self-critical and actually changing something when something comes up that really shooks on some fundamental beliefs that you have.
Well, that's really a nice way to finish, and I just want to link that back again. I mentioned Thomas Kuhn at the start of this episode. He wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions in 1962. He coined the term paradigm, and in that book he specifically refers to this concept of what you've been describing there, of the anomaly, of the thing that occurs that does not fit into your understanding. And you're, like you said, you have like two choices there. What do? Do you take that anomaly seriously and say, interesting, how do you feel about that? Is it fun to find out about this new thing? Or is there a feeling of, no, that can't be right, I'm going to fit that anomaly into my own existing paradigm, I'm going to make it work to maintain the integrity of the paradigm, rather than following the anomaly and trying to understand what that represents. And for Kuhn, this was a real significant problem in science. When something showed up outside of a scientific paradigm, too many scientists just wanted to brush it under the carpet, and be like, oh no, don't worry about that. That's fine. But it's like, I don't know, these anomalies they keep coming up, but maybe we should be taking them seriously. And yeah, that aspect of self-reflection, humility, which you've embodied so well there in these closing remarks, Martin, I think is a nice way to close this episode on assumptions and paradigms and perhaps the deeper level movements of our football understanding. Martin, as always, it's been a pleasure to share this time with you in the third circle. The third circle,
Same.
The third circle is for everyone. Everyone can be part of the third circle. Please interact with us, communicate with us, leave us your comments. You can leave us ratings as well. Seeing those 5-star ratings is nice for the ego, so keep them coming. You can leave whatever rating you like, obviously, but it's
No. Only 5 stars.
Yeah, only 5 stars. That's all you'll get.
If you are unhappy, send us a message, and we will correct whatever you didn't like.
Yeah, exactly. If you're the anomaly, then
we want to improve.
If you're the anomaly, we're going to fit your complaint into our own paradigm of reference, right? We're definitely not going to change. Yeah. That's a joke, listeners. We're always changing on the third circle. So until next time, Martin, listeners, it's goodbye from me, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Bye-bye, see you.
In that empire, the art of cartography attained such perfection that the map of a single province occupied the entirety of a city, and the map of the empire, the entirety of a province. In time, those unconscionable maps no longer satisfied, and the Cartographers Guild struck a map of the empire, whose size was that of the empire, and which coincided point for point with it. The following generations, who were not so fond of the study of cartography as their forebears had been, saw that the vast map was useless, and not without some pitilessness was it that they delivered it up to the inclemencies of sun and winters. In the deserts of the West, still today, there are tattered ruins of the map inhabited by animals and beggars. In all the land, there is no other relic of the disciplines of geography.